chief epidemiologist, how are you doing? How are things going? He said, well, we're content with our results. Please extrapolate, they ask him. He says, well, our nursing homes weren't protected well. They're very large compared to our Nordic neighbor. They're very large. They had some hygiene issues. They had rampant 50 to 60% death rate came from those in the elderly centers. So if you decrease that, it's down to 2,500. And then Norway, which is right next door, is 5 million, half the size. They had much less death rate, but they also have less immunity. So 1 to 2% immunity versus about 20% immunity. So guess what happens during cold and flu when this starts up again? And you have a nation that has immunity and a nation that has no immunity. You don't have to be a scientist to know one nation is better prepared than the other. Also, they didn't have a free-falling economy. There's a public health, there's medical problems that arise when you shut down. People say it's just financial. Au contraire, I have to say to that. Let's talk about the 600% increase in suicide reportings. Let's talk about the spousal abuse. Let's talk about alcoholism. I have firsthand cases of suicide in my area. I have firsthand cases of people who are going into a bad depression. These are not just me. I've talked to ER physicians around the country that said public health crisis secondary to financial lockdown. This is not financial, this is medical. So you can't just say that it's a financial issue. And when I look at Norway and I say kids are in school, restaurants are open, economy is not in free fall, I think that is a sustainable model. When you ask Anders Tegnell, how are you guys doing? He goes, we're in a sustainable model. He goes, the U.S. pulled it back down to an unsustainable, impractical model that you can't do. We can do this for years. Can you?
And they want to shut down America again, which again, it seems a common theme here, if I were to kind of summarize, is that we've been deceived and we are continually being deceived. There seems to be a broader totalitarian agenda at play, and that there is a solution that actually no one wants to talk about, right?
I think one thing that, the overall problem to this approach is we are, it's a strategy problem where we're locking down everyone. We want masks on everyone. And we're kind of forgetting that the fatality rate in children that go to schools, in people under 45, people under 60, is extremely low. This is not a universal strategy for everyone. There's no reason to destroy the youth's lives, to destroy the economy, to destroy businesses when this affects a small percentage of the population. That should be the focus, we made that mistake back in March with nursing homes. We didn't focus on the most vulnerable people. And that's, I think, what we're still doing is we're not focusing on the most vulnerable people. We're worried about the 22-year-old who's walking down the street without a mask on. That's who we're yelling at right now. Okay? And so this is a misdirection on appropriate resources and energy to focus on those older patients, those people that maybe should be on hydroxychloroquine, the ones that maybe should have guidance, the right guidance that's different from someone who is younger. And it's a total messaging problem, I think.
Into March, I realized that locking down wasn't necessary. In fact, I was so naive at the time. I had no idea. I thought I would call a few people. I had some connections with the medical community, pretty extensive actually, in my state, and I thought I could call around and let people know, like, hey, we've got a strategy here. It's not bad. We can prophylax, and we could use hydroxychloroquine as a first-line therapy. We don't need to lock down. We can protect our elderly with prophylaxis, really low doses. And I actually thought that was actually going to be well received. Instead, I was told to go home and to go home and don't use the personal protective equipment because I was just wasting resources. And I literally was on the phone. I won't say who it was, but a fairly high-up person in our society in Texas on one of the boards. And I told him, I said, how old are you? He said, I'm 40-something. I said, look, I've been through the AIDS epidemic, okay? We didn't know if we touched the patients what was going to happen. And I go, I've been through that pandemic itself was very eye-opening for me. I was very scared. I was a young doc, and I didn't go home. I went to work. I'm going to see patients. I told them right then, I said, look, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but as far as I'm concerned, you're a coward. You go home. I said, I'm not going home. I'm going to work. I go, I've done 6 years in the ER, 100, 200 hours a month. I've been on a bunch of trauma teams. I'm not going home. I'm going to see patients. So that turned into short visits with some of my friends, some of my patients who would call me knowing that I had talked to them about this disease, and I ended up treating the disease. And then I got on a Facebook Live video that in about 2 hours reached 100,000 people. And I saw it and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get some repercussions. Sure enough, I did. The board came calling and they said, you said that hydroxychloroquine works and you're basically a public menace. And you know, we want to know who you treated. You said at the time, it was really early on, I said I treated 3 patients. And I had to provide all the records, all the information. I was very intimidated, as you might imagine, because, you know, I have to practice. I have to feed my family. I love what I'm doing, but, you know, I'm not independently wealthy. I was a little bit afraid. I really was. That lasted about a day. At that point, you know, again, as Dr. Gold said, we've got to do the right thing for the patients. And at the time, I wrote a bunch of letters saying, I'm not going to let my patients get on vents and ECMO. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to allow it to happen. I'm going to treat them. I don't care. Well, suffice it to say, you know, I got reprimanded. I'm still in a process of negotiation with that whole thing. But as Dr. Armstrong said, I'm really not afraid. I know I'm doing the right thing. I've treated a number of patients. I won't tell you how many because then I'll probably have to provide records for all that. So for the purposes of this statement, I'm going to say I treated 3. Okay? So the board is, the fear of reprisal is the reason why we're in this place right now. Docs don't want to do this. There's a fear of reprisal. I was very worried about it, and I can tell you all the people who believe in this medication, who believe in early treatment, feel the same way. They're really scared to go forward and treat patients because they don't want to lose their medical license, and that's a big deal. So the intimidation is amazing.